Okay, we're in Numbers. We're doing 2 chapters today. So you remember where we are in Numbers. The Israelites are just at the edge of the promised land. Okay? They've completed the 40 years of wandering. And as we've gone through Numbers, let me remind you the most important thing that we have learned in Numbers is that if you just read it, it's like any of the Old Testament books. If you just read it, you're scratching your head going, I don't get it. And so this is complain, punish, complain, punish, complain, punish, complain, punish. That's what it feels like, but that's not actually what's happening. Every time they complain about something, God intervenes in a uniquely different way each time. So he never repeats himself. The way he interacts with them each time is different. Okay? Sometimes it involves punishment, but really what he's after is he's trying to find ways to connect with his people in a way that draws them in. And if you think about it, that's your life, every one of you. You know, it's just not a set of rules. We don't look here. This is not a rule book, okay? It's not. This is a story. It's not even an owner's manual. It's a story of how God, from the beginning of time until we all enter into glory, is working tirelessly. Jesus said, my Father works all the time, and so do I. He's working tirelessly to draw us closer to him. Okay? In fact, when you think about the gospel, you're sitting on an airplane, and a person next to you is reading a book, and you say to that person, what's that book about? Well, it's a fiction book. It's a book on music theory. I'm taking a class in college. It's a book on Western Civ, all of that stuff, right? They can tell you what it's about, and they tell you, what's this? What are you reading? What's that book about? How do you answer that question? Believe it or not, in my seminary years, that was one of the hardest questions to answer. What's this book about? Because what do you do with the genocide texts? We chatted on that just 2 or 3 weeks ago. What do you do with all of the passages that don't make sense in our world today? Okay? It's easy for us as Christians to focus on the cross, and that is the centerpiece of Christian theology, but it's so much bigger than that. God is interested in redeeming everything in creation, the trees. When you go into the promised land, let the fruit trees rest for a year because they've been abused. There's dignity for trees. All right? A righteous person cares for their animals. Animals have dignity. You probably don't remember this, but back when we were looking at the covenants in the amphitheater, we looked at why do the animals run away from us? Why? Well, when you go back and you read the story of Noah and the flood and the covenant, you're all familiar with the rainbow, right? He put a rainbow in the sky to remind us of his faithfulness. How many of you know that? Okay, probably everybody. We learned it somewhere along the way. But rarely ever do we talk about the second part of the covenant. I'm going to put the fear of us in the animals. That's part of the covenant with Noah. Right? Because how did he get all these animals into the ark in a way that it was safe? Because there was no fear of us. That comes after the flood. And why did he do it? To be gracious to the animals because they have dignity too. And he knows what's in our hearts and we're going to abuse them. So when you get to the law, the Mosaic law, even a righteous person cares for their animals. They have dignity. Trees have dignity. You have dignity. Women, you have dignity. Children, you have dignity. And so this is all being reversed through these books. We've gone now through Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. We've gone through all of them. And that's what we see happening. And so throughout Numbers, every time they complain, and by the way, he sets them up for the complaints. He takes them to places where there's no water. That's God doing it. What did Paul say in Romans? How would I have known that it was a sin to covet if I had not been given the command, don't covet? That means that God, at some level, is complicit in our failures. Why? Because he wants us to come closer to him in a fallen world. That's why. And so he takes them to places where there's no water. What he wants them to learn is that with the ancient gods, they didn't try to to get the gods to take care of them. They wanted the gods off their backs. They just wanted to appease the gods. That was the goal. They didn't want to emulate the gods. The gods were not worth emulating. They're like us, okay? They're vicious. They fight. They argue. And when you study the ancient cosmologies, the ancient gods, they weren't very nice. And they lived in terror. And when you go to a lot of the Asian nations today, you still see that today, all right? So he's trying to teach them to ask different questions. So he takes them where there's no water. All they have to do is ask, where's the water? I'll take care of you. There's no food. Where's the food? I'll take care of you. But they don't. They complain. They never got slavery out of their systems. They never did. Now the second generation did. We saw that just a few weeks ago when they started to complain about the water, so God gave them water. So then he takes them to the next spot and he says, I'll give you water. And so they sing a song, spring up, oh well. That's a command. Come on, let the water come out of the ground. God's going to do it. So the second generation learned from the first generation. That's why I asked the question many weeks ago, is 40 years, is that a curse or is that a blessing? Well, they still had to pay the price. They're all going to die, the older generation. But it gave them time to teach a new generation about faithfulness and to get slavery out of the system. So now when we're walking through Numbers and you see they complain, God steps in, and each time it's a different way he responds to them, which is what we experience in life and in community, isn't it? He's not just a malicious, a vindictive God. He's not punishing us. We do not believe in that whole idea. We punish, we sin and God punishes you. I've asked the question many times over the years, how many of you have gotten angry in the last month? Go ahead, raise your hand. Let me see. It should be almost everybody. Okay? Yeah. How many, I don't know, some of you won't raise your hands. How many of you have lusted in the last month? My hand's up. Okay? Coveted something, right? And did God punish you? No, that's not the way it works. Retributive justice is not part of Christian theology. Okay? When God intervenes, he intervenes for the purpose of drawing us closer to him. It's not considered punishment. Now, it is for the non-Christian, for those who don't believe, but not for the faithful. We're going to see that today. We're going to start to see it today. Again. So whenever we do sin, we move in the wrong direction, God doesn't step in to punish us. He steps in to create an environment where it draws us closer to him. He wants us to respond to him. And that's what we learned from the book of Numbers. The book of Leviticus, we learned about holiness and what that looks like. Okay? We learned. So the law, you can think of it this way. Think of it as a beacon. Don't think of it as rules. All right? That's what the Pharisees did. So don't think of it as rules. Jesus was really harsh on the Pharisees because that's how they interpreted his rules. And that was never the intent. So David could violate the law. Hezekiah could violate the law. Jesus violated the law. His disciples violated the law. And God blessed them. Because they understood what the law was. It's not a mirror for society. It's not a set of rules. It's a beacon to get us to look to what we were created to be as humans. That's what it was for. In our churches, in our homes, in our schools, in our communities, the law. I love the argument going on right now about 10 Commandments. Why wouldn't we put them in schools? That's the basic defining characteristic between the Western nations and the Eastern nations. The 10 Commandments are really good, okay? And they're not specific. They're not telling you what to do. That's why the rest of the law is given to help you understand in that culture how to live out those 10 Commandments, how to learn to love the Lord your God, to really love him. You know, the first century Christians, when they were killing them, you know what their defense, their apology was, their defense? Why are you killing us? We don't steal your wives. We're not defrauding you. We're not cheating you. That was the argument of the first century Christians as they were being burned at the stake and killed. Where'd that come from? It came right out of the 10 Commandments. And that's what society should look like. And so whenever you sin, God is not interested in punishing you. He's interested in creating an environment that gets your attention so that you want to draw closer to him. That's why I've said over the years, if you're finding yourself struggling with passion toward the Lord, that just means you're a little too far away. That's all it means. I'm not trying to drive you to guilt. I'm trying to say your distance is a little bit too far. One step closer to the cross and watch what happens. And it's hard for us to trust the Lord. Do you really trust the Lord that if you give away all your stuff, that He'll fill your barns and your vats to overflowing? Do you really trust that? Do you believe that? Malachi? God says, test me and see. Test me and see if I won't give you all the resources you need to do ministry in a fallen world. So we've talked as elders many times over the years, money's never the issue. Oh, we've got to be responsible, but it's not the issue. So now we're almost at the promised land. They're there. Okay? They're sitting right outside Moab. And Balak, the king of Moab, is terrified. He doesn't know that God said, don't touch Moab. They're relatives. But he saw what they did to Sihon and Og and all these other nations on the way here. They had destroyed them. He saw that. But Moab are relatives in history. So they don't realize, he doesn't know that God had said, don't touch. He's terrified. So what does he do? He does what we naturally do. We naturally, when we get into a point of stress or tension, rarely do we, this is what we're always working on with you, rarely do resort back to faith. No, we always resort to world. That's what we resort to. So we've asked these questions over the years. Where's your hope? It is in your IRA? Or is it in the Lord? I still remember the first time I got turned down for 2 promotions. Public service company, I was back before we had the confidentiality rules. And I asked them, and I was up at a nuclear plant, and I said, why was I not even interviewed? And HR said, because you're a Caucasian male. So you were the first on the list, so we had to pull all the Caucasian males due to EEOC. And I remember that process. I remember as a young person in my 20s wrestling with, what do I think about this? Everything in me wanted to be angry. And I thought, you know what? I think we should give women a chance. That's my theology. Now my heart goes this way because I feel betrayed. And I had to wrestle that through. I remember that clear as could be. And said, nope, we need to give women a chance. And I'm willing to pay a price as well for that. You ever had your salary cut to make ways for minorities? I have. You willing to do that? See what I mean? When we come up with these problems, when there's no water to drink, when there's no food to eat, what are we going to do? Are we going to go back to these stories and look at God as faithful? Taste and see that the Lord is good? Or are we going to default to what the world defaults to? Cynicism, criticism, complaining, lack of fairness. You know what justice is in the world? It's a form of vengeance. Okay? That's really what it is. That's really what we want, I think, when we talk about justice. Do you know what justice is in Scripture? It's the same word as righteousness and justification. True justice is doing what is in the best interest of another person. That's true justice. But is that the way we think? I'm watching the world go crazy because of what happened with Charlie Kirk. It's insane. This world has no bearing of what's the right thing to do. How about forgiveness? You want to live a Christian life? Then forgive. No, what is it we want? Burn in hell. That's not right. And so that's what's happening. Now, the amazing thing about this story is the Israelites have no idea this is happening. These stories with Balaam and Balak, they have no idea. They're just down on the plains. They know because God has told them, don't attack the Moabites. They have no intention, no war plan to attack the Moabites. But yet the Moabites don't know that, and they're terrified. So they bring in this internationally acclaimed diviner called Balaam. We looked 2 weeks ago at the story of his donkey and what was going on there. He's internationally acclaimed. They went to another country to get him, paid good money to have him. So he comes up there, and he comes up on a cliff, a high place, and Balak says, I want you to curse. He doesn't know who the people are. He hasn't told them. As far as he knows, it's just an army out there. He doesn't know they're the Israelites. He's going to find out today who they are, and then life gets really different for him. Life changes for him when he realizes who he's being asked to curse. Okay? So he goes up to high places, and he gives 4 different prophecies, if you will, 4 different discussion sermons, and every time he blesses them, he doesn't curse them. So we're going to work through these real quickly. Okay, you can read them on your own, but I'm going to read each one because they're important. So he delivers 7 messages, 4 related to Israel and 3 related to other nations. And the very first one is found in chapter 23. Okay, so verses 1 and 2. Balaam says, build me 7 altars here and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me. Balak did as Balaam said, and the 2 of them offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Okay, he's immediately resorting to divination practices. The one thing Leviticus did not allow is you cannot allow an offering, you can't offer a sacrifice to discern the will of the gods. That was prevalent all throughout the ancient world. And God said, no. Number 1, you can't appease me with an offering. I just love you because of who you are. I made you. And number 2, you can't figure out my will by making an offering. So what does he do? He resorts to a standard divination practice. And it's a big one. Let's offer 7 bulls and, 7 lambs. He's going to offer a lot of animals. He's putting his best foot forward. Maybe the gods will listen. Maybe this God will listen if we make all these sacrifices. And so the diviner gets controlled by divinity because God takes over. No, he's not going to accept that. And so here's the message, verse 7. Then Balaam spoke to his message. Okay, now did you hear that? Balaam spoke his message. That's going to change in just a little bit. Balak brought me from Aram, the king of Moab, from the eastern mountains. Come, he said, curse Jacob for me. He just learned that he's about to curse Israel. Now the news has spread all over the land of what Israel has done. That's why all the kings are terrified. They're all terrified. It's not that big of a property. That land, the Middle East, is not that big. And they all knew the story of coming out of Exodus, what had happened to the Pharaoh. They knew all that. And so he just learned, I've been asked to curse Israel. So how can I curse, verse 8, those whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced? From the rocky peaks I see them. From the heights I view them. I see a people who live apart and do not consider themselves one of the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob or number even a fourth of Israel? Let me die the death. So now he prays, let me die. All of a sudden, I'm pitting myself against the one true God, not against these other gods. I'm being asked to do something that's really going to tick off this God. I just as soon die. That's what he's saying. Okay, so he says in there, who can count the dust of Jacob? In Genesis chapter 13, right? He says in 13:16, the Lord is talking to Abram, I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. That's what he's looking at. So in his statement, God gave him these words to say. God is saying, I wonder what it was like for the Israelites to learn this story later on. Because they're down on the plains. They don't know what's happening up here. This is beyond them. Which raises a theological question that we need to wrestle with. Do you realize God is always on your behalf, always active on your behalf, even when you're not paying attention? Do you realize that? That's what Jesus meant when he said, my Father is always working, and so am I on your behalf. God is always at work on your behalf, and it's right here. They don't even know it. They're down on the plains thinking, we're going to see Moab. We're almost at the promised land. And they're up here thinking, we got to curse these people or they're going to destroy us like they did these other nations. So, dust of Jacob, his promise to Abraham is beginning to be fulfilled. It's beginning to be fulfilled. That's how numerous they are. So then you have the second message, okay? He repeats the 7 offerings. We're not going to read it. He hasn't learned his lesson yet. So then we learn in Numbers 23, verse 18, this is the second message. Arise, Balak. So then Balaam spoke this message, okay? So these are Balaam. He's giving the words. Arise, Balak, and listen. Hear me, son of Zippor. God is not human that he should lie, not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? I have received the command to bless. I have blessed, and I cannot change it. No misfortune is seen in Jacob. No misery is observed in Israel. So he's saying, I have to answer to God for this. God can't lie. He promised to take care of his people. All Balak had to do was say, what about us? And he would have said, he'll take care of you too. But he doesn't. He's got a hard heart, which is the pattern all the way through these books, isn't it? You get to choose. Are you going to have a hard heart or not? That's your choice. You get to choose when difficult decisions come your way. Are you going to make good decisions? We teach a class, Don Payne, who many of you know, he and I co-teach a class in a doctoral program on theological decision making. How to make decisions based on faith, not sight. How do you do that? So here he is, and that's the heart of his message. There's no trouble among the Israelites. They're happy as can be down on the plains. Why? He goes on, the Lord their God is with them. The shout of the king is among them. Okay, well, at this time in history, Israel doesn't have a king. So this must be referring to the true king, God. Okay? So they're being led by a divine king. God brought them out of Egypt. He clarifies it in case you miss it in the next verse. God brought them out of Egypt. They have the strength of a wild ox. I love that. Because the Moabites had referred to them earlier as wild ox. And so they do have that strength, but it's given to them by God. That's why I said, guys, folks, we have nothing to worry about. This is the God that we serve right here. This is it. As a church, we have nothing to worry about. And then he goes on and clarifies it that God is in control, not fate, not a diviner. Verse 23, there is no divination against Jacob, no evil omens against Israel. It will now be said of Jacob and of Israel, see what God has done. The people rise like a lioness. They rouse themselves like a lion that does not rest till it devours its prey and drinks the blood of its victims. Okay, after the first prophecy, Balak, which is not up here, he said, what have you done to me? I brought you out here to curse, and now you've blessed them. So now Balak responds to this one. Neither curse them or bless them. Just shut up. Okay? Don't say a word. I don't want you to do anything. That's how he responds to this one. So now we get to the third message. And this one starts out very differently. So, chapter 24. Now, when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not resort to divination as at other times. He didn't go offer all these animals, in other words. Okay? He's no longer seeking the counsel of the Lord. Okay, the divination practices were designed to seek the counsel of the gods. He's no longer doing that. He wants his money. That's what he wants. He's trying to fulfill a contract. God has other plans. He did not resort to divination as at other times, but he turned his face toward the wilderness, because this is on this third one. He can look out on the wilderness and he can see Israel. So he looks at Israel. When Balaam looked out and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe, now listen, the Spirit of God came on him, and he spoke his message. Now it's the prophecy of Balaam, son of Beor, the prophecy of one whose eye sees clearly, the prophecy of one who hears the words of God, who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls prostrate and whose eyes are open. God has now taken control of him. So the first two, he said what he hears from God, but now he no longer has a choice. God has taken control of him. No more divination, no more fates. He no longer seeks the Lord, so the Lord comes to him. That's what the Lord does. So this poetry has 12 units, which probably signifies now he's blessing Israel, 12 tribes. Okay? And just listen to it. This is devastating now for Balak, because Balak decided to take action against God's chosen. Verse 20, I have received the command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot change it. No misfortune is seen in Jacob, no misery observed in Israel. I'm still reading 3. Let me get over to here. Verse 5 of chapter 24. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. Remember what God said about Job to Satan? Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on the earth, his faith. When God starts to speak about his children, this is how he feels about us. Right here. And they're scoundrels. Okay? They're scoundrels. And he still is so proud of them. Listen to those words. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. Like valleys, they spread out like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Boy, isn't that like Psalm 1? How blessed is the one who does not stand in the way of the wicked. But he's like a tree planted by the water. I mean, this imagery just flows throughout the Bible. Water will flow from their buckets. Their seed will have abundant water. Just before this, they sang, spring up, all water. They command the water. We now know who God is. Come out of the ground. So he's answering to Balak, who is the true God here and who's truly in control. Their king will be greater than Agag. The kingdom will be exalted. God brought them out of Egypt. They have the strength of a wild ox. He just repeated that from the third one. They devour hostile nations. They break their bones in pieces. With their arrows, they pierce them. This is what's about to happen. Okay, this is devastating for Moab because of a leader that's leading them in the wrong direction. Like a lion, they crouch and lie down like a lioness. Who dares to rouse them? May those who bless you be blessed, and those who curse you be cursed. This is absolutely devastating. So then, he gives a fourth message in verse 15, and now he shows the true catastrophe of Balak, his unwillingness to trust the Lord. And they knew the gods. They knew all the ancient gods. They named the gods from all the different nations, and they know what's happened with this God, and he refuses. So listen to his fourth message. The prophecy of Balaam, son of Beor, the prophecy of one whose eye sees clearly, the prophecy of one who hears the words of God, who has knowledge from the Most High, who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls prostrate, and those eyes are opened. This is Balaam saying, this is what happened when God took control of me. Here it is. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. So now we're learning that Israel plays a central role in the redemptive history of all of humanity. Right here. Balak's hearing this. The Israelites, they're not. They're down in the plains. He will crush the foreheads of Moab, the skulls of all the people of Sheth. Edom will be conquered. Seir, his enemy, will be conquered. But Israel will go strong. A ruler will come out of Jacob and destroy the survivors of the city. This is total catastrophe for Moab. Total catastrophe for Moab. The final messages are against the other nations, but it raises some questions that every place we go raises questions we should wrestle with. One is, are you aware that God is always, always, always working on your behalf? Are you aware of that? That's the story of the whole Bible. Second question. How much faith do you have? I can't answer that for you. I can only answer it for me. If you've heard me tell the story, I've devoted my life to answer these questions for me. Never realized that one day I might be asking you the questions, and here I am. Do you really believe it? Do you really believe it? Are you willing to trust in these promises? Every story has the same theme. This is God's creation. We are His creation. And those that turn to Him, He's working on their behalf day and night, protecting them. Oh, He lets things happen. We learned from Ephesians 3 that the mystery that was revealed to Paul was that what happens to us is not for our benefit. It's not even for your benefit. We are on display to all the powers in the heavenlies, the authorities in the heavenlies, Ephesians 3. Paul says this is a mystery that was revealed. It wasn't the Jews and the Gentiles. That was prophesied by all the prophets. But what was a stunning, stunning revelation was that the manifold wisdom of God, the various aspects of God's wisdom, would be revealed through us to all the authorities, the powers in the heavenlies. Because that's where the battle is. That's why Paul says in Ephesians 6, our battle is not against flesh and blood, against all the powers and the authorities in the heavens. That's where the battle's taking place, right there. And it's already over. It's finished. We can't see it. So what happens in your life? Yeah, it is partly for your benefit because it's designed to draw you closer to Him and teach you to trust Him. But more than that, it's the story of Job. Have you considered Job? He's not going to fail. The last thing Job says is, where are you, God? If you would bother to show up, you would repent because you're wrong. And God says, okay, here I am. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Surely you must know because you were there. I love it. You know? And after a chapter and a half, He says, I repent. And God says, no, we're not done yet. The old translation, gird up your loins like a man. Would you really annul my judgment to justify yourself? He could have said to Job, Satan did this, but he didn't. He took responsibility. This was my decision. Why? To prove that his faith would not fail and to show all Ephesians 3, all the powers and authorities in the heavenlies, that your faith will survive. You may get angry. You may not like it. But it will survive. Do you really believe that? That the Lord is always working on your behalf? What's amazing is that we're going to see next week why that's so astonishing. Because He knew what they were about to do. And so it even becomes more astonishing that He defends them in light of what they're about to do. God is always working on your behalf. You have nothing to worry about. Do you believe it? Father, thank you. Thank you for these stories, Lord. This story captures me that your people are down in the plains. They have no idea what's happening. And the people who should know are the ones rebelling. They know. They hear the prophecy directly. And it just reminds us of how wonderful your love is. You never gave up on the Israelites. You never give up on us. Thank you that you went after Peter after he denied you. Thank you for going after me when I deny you. When I live in such a way that shows the world I don't really believe my own theology. Help us, Lord, as a church to continue to look to you in faith, because you truly are a good God. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.